fantastic day. Yeah.
Cool. Congratulations for that, man. And, yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. So, welcome, Rutger. I got it right. Welcome to this show, which will be only the both of us, because my stupid co-host forgot that he had his, wife's birthday. So Tim. Yeah, good job. You screwed it up again, but anyway. So we'll try to make it entertainment, as even if we don't have Tim on the show. So Rutger, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And actually, I'm very excited to have you on the show. It will be our last, not our last podcast, but we will take a summer break. So you'll be one of the last guests before our summer break. So, and actually, I'm very, very excited to have you on this podcast, because it's one of my kind of favorite topic what you're discussing about. It's kind of hopeful. It's kind of a utopian, can we say that, utopian subject, something like that. But what you propose, or one of your big idea, is free money for everyone. And I love this idea, right? But when the first reaction, I guess, when you talk about to people about this idea, they will just look at you with big eyes like this, and they'll say, "What the fuck are you talking about? Are you totally crazy? Have you lost your mind? This is not how the world works," right? And then I watched your TED talk, and you have pretty strong arguments, my friend. Pretty strong arguments, and it's So I would love you to just to describe a little bit more about this, and how did you come to this subject, to this topic? How the hell did you stumble upon this free money for everyone? If you can give a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you could call it, of course, free money for everyone. The other name that we give to this idea is a basic income, or citizens' dividend.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that it's actually a very old idea. So it goes back all the way to the 18th century, when Thomas Paine, one of the founding fathers of the United States, he wrote a book in 1797, if I'm correct. And in that book, he proposed that everyone should receive what he called a dividend of progress. And his argument was that, we are so rich thanks to the accomplishments of our forefathers. We have all these institutions and these technologies, and even the languages that we speak. And all these are accomplishments that we didn't do it ourselves. It's actually a gift from the past. And his idea is that a gift is something you should share. And we could do that with a dividend of progress. And later the idea became that this could be a basic income for everyone. So the idea of a basic income is that it should be universal. Everyone should get it, whether you're rich or poor, or young or old, or men or women, or employed or unemployed, doesn't matter. It should be individual. So it's not on a household basis, but it's an individual right, and it's completely unconditional. So you have to do nothing for it, and no one's going to tell you what you have to do with it. So that's the basic idea, and you're right. This is a utopian idea. We've never seen this in history. It has never happened. We have seen some small experiments with it in the 70s and the 80s, but up till now, it's still a utopian idea.
So let me go back to everyone gets it, right? Everyone gets it. So does it mean that as soon as you're born on this earth, you get it? Or do you have like an age limit? Is it like, how.
Well, in most proposals, you would get the basic income when you turn 18 or 21 in some proposals. And children would receive a basic income as well, but a smaller one.
Right.
But, there are many, many different versions. So we can't really talk about the basic income idea. Right. It's a huge subject of debate, and there are many versions of it. Versions with which I personally agree, versions which I don't think are such a very good idea. I always see it as a directional thought. Right. A directional thought in which we would make welfare, for example, more unconditional and more universal.
So the thing again is the universal income. As soon as you ask for that, is how much will I get? Does it mean that I'll be able to pay my Ferrari with that? And I'll be able to splash myself. But to me, the idea here is to be able for everyone to live decently. Is it like to provide food and shelter, something like that? Is it what it is?
Yeah, well, it's really a basic income. So it's enough to pay for your food, for shelter, a little bit of education, and that's it. It's not enough to live a life in luxury.
Right.
Almost everyone would want to earn additional income on top of their basic income. But it is enough to escape poverty. So with the basic income, we would make a life without poverty an unconditional right. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of it. For me, it's all about freedom. So the big promise of all the ideologies of the 19th and 20th century, of course, was always freedom. This is what liberalism promised, and socialism. But up until now, it has never really been delivered. Because if you want real freedom, you also need the capacity and the power to say no to a job that you don't like. And nowadays, many people are stuck in jobs that they hate. Simply because they have to pay the bills.
So, but what is the, if I say, I will use this term, the business case behind that, why should we go for it, right? What will this basic income will solve? Fine. First of all, sure, it will solve poverty. Fine. We all agree with that, right? But
well, that's actually an investment. So that's the first very important thing that we have to remember is that poverty is hugely expensive. There are a few things that are more expensive in life than poverty. Just think of the additional healthcare costs or the higher crime rates, of the lower investments in education and lower tax incomes for the government. Poverty is really a very expensive problem, and there's been done a lot of research that shows that if you eradicate poverty, that you actually save money in the long run. Right. So I think that's the most important business case in favor of the basic income. It's the most efficient, most direct, most dignified way to eradicate poverty. And I think there's quite some evidence that shows that this is actually an investment.
Right. So, and that's a huge thing to me, because you don't think about that. You see somebody who is poor living on the street, and you say, well, you know what? It doesn't cost anything, and this is a wrong idea, actually. The crime rate, the injustice, and all this stuff. That costs us as a society a huge, burden, I guess.
Definitely. Let me give you a few numbers.
Yeah.
So there's one study that was conducted in 2013 that showed that the cost of child poverty. So I'm just talking about child poverty, not poverty in general, but the cost of child poverty in the US are $500 billion each year.
Fuck yeah.
Now, there's one economist who calculated what it would cost to eradicate poverty completely in the US by direct cash transfers. And this sum is actually 175 billion. So it's cheaper to eradicate all poverty in the US than the cost of child poverty only are. So, just with a very simple calculation, I think you can show that it's a really good investment. Most people in business would love these kinds of investments, with a return of 200 or 300%. We see the same thing with the problem of homelessness. So there's also a lot of research that has been done in my country, the Netherlands, but also in the US, that shows that it's actually more expensive to let people live on the street than to give them a free apartment, for example, because all these services they have to provide when they're on the streets are just much more expensive.
And I'm sorry, right now there's a little bit of connection problem, so hopefully it will still be okay on the recording. But that's very, very interesting, because this is not what we think, with our belief system that we're having over there. It's just kind of the first thing that pops into mind when you say basic income is that is extremely expensive. Who will pay for that? Who will pay for this? It's not possible there. It's too much money. And this, just by this argument that you just described, it's more expensive to live in the system that we are today. Basically, is it basically what you just said?
Yeah, definitely. I think that if you live in a city, for example, with a lot of homeless people on the streets, with a lot of poverty in it, even if you're rich, that it hurts for everyone. If your neighbor is doing well, you're doing a little bit better as well. This is where wealth comes from. People don't get rich on their own. If countries in your neighborhood are doing better, then you're doing better as well. So poverty is expensive for everyone. That's just a fact of life. But somehow we forget that all the time.
Yeah, is it like because we are just like only thinking about ourselves, just like me, like very selfishly and without, just realizing that we are part of a community, and
and I think one of the problems is that there is so much distrust of others, of strangers. I think this all has to do with the way that we get our information at the beginning of the 21st century. So how do you know how your friends or your family are doing? Well, of course, you know them personally. So most people trust their friends. Most people trust their family. But how do you know other people that live in your country? Well, there's only one way nowadays. You have to watch the news. Yeah. And the news is always very pessimistic, and there's a very simple reason for that. The news always focuses on the exceptions and never on the general rule. Absolutely. And the general rule is that most people are nice. Most people can be trusted. Most people want to make something of their lives. And this is, of course, never on the news because it's not an exception. It's the rule. So this is a very simple reason that we don't trust each other, and that policies like these, which start with an image of human nature that most people can be trusted, that many people don't think these policies can work because they just watch too much television.
That's it. We need to, but that's extremely important. We have a distorted view of reality, and I have a chance. I was very, lucky to travel a lot, and I've been to Middle East, to Asia, to Latin America, and it's amazing. I even been in Libya, and even there you just, oh shit, what will happen over there, and it's people, as you said, are friendly, people are good in general. And unfortunately, fear doesn't sell. Fear sells on the TV. And good news, they don't sell really much. And that's unfortunate. But and there's a link there because, and what happened in Switzerland, by the way, this is something that happened. They had this referendum, where they had to vote about the idea of basic income. And it has been rejected, by a huge percentage, So, and I think one of the motives behind that is the fear that, first of all, it will be too costly, but nobody will work after that. People will be lazy.
This is the main argument that I have to counter time and time again. And the interesting thing here is that. When I ask people, for example, during lectures, would you stop working where you would receive a basic income? Then almost everyone says no. I want to do something with my life, and maybe I'll do a little less paid work and do a little more unpaid work. So I'll spend more time with my children or with the elderly, or do volunteers work, etc., etc. But almost no one says that he wants to sit on the couch and do nothing and play video games. But when you asked what other people would do, and then I'm not talking about just friends or family, but really other people that you don't know, then almost everyone suddenly says, well, other people, they're lazy, etc. So that's why this policy is not going to work. And this is exactly what we saw happening in Switzerland. So there were huge billboards in Switzerland with photographs of overweight men in their 50s sitting in front of the tube and eating popcorn, and then the message beneath that was, "Do you want to pay for his income?" or something like that. That's very effective because it taps into something that politicians and journalists are telling us all the time, that most people cannot be trusted. So yeah, I really believe that the battle for basic income is really a battle of ideas. You can show time and time again that it's a very smart economic proposal, but at the core, you need to do something with this ethical idea that many people have, that you have to work for your money, and that most people are lazy and have to be pushed into work. If that won't change, we'll never get a basic income.
It seems to me that it's, your idea is a very progressive idea, and, it doesn't work because right now it seems that everyone is fearful. There's a lot of fear, and they say, so what about the others? It doesn't deserve that, and I deserve this. It seems like we have this kind of, battle between, and not have this broader picture, this very progressive idea to say we are, all together on this planet to thrive and to create and to have an happy life. But no, and it's just very sad actually to me when the Swiss, which who are like very progressive as well. For instance, we have Johann Hari, who is this writer about drugs. They are very progressive on drug policy in Switzerland. But here, for this, it's just like it seems that for work, for instance, we have this mindset which are back to the beginning of the 20th century, where you need to work very hard and you need to work very painfully, and then you need to get your salary because this is how we do things, And that seems to be in the psyche of very much everyone. What do you think about that?
Well, I guess I'm a little more optimistic.
Yeah.
When I first started writing about this was in October 2013, no one knew what I was talking about. So no one knew what basic income even was. Many people thought that the basic income that I was referring to, the basic income of a banker on top of which you receive his bonuses. And I said, no, it's a different topic. And it's only 3 years later, and many people, at least in the Western world, nowadays know what we're talking about, have been introduced to the idea. And even more than 20% of the people in Switzerland voted for this idea that was completely unknown and regarded as completely crazy just 3 years ago. And what we also see is that this is actually a golden age of basic income experiments. So there's been a big experiment that has been announced in Finland. There's going to be an experiment in Oakland. There's going to be experiments probably in Canada. And what I saw happening in the country where I live, in the Netherlands, that, when I first wrote about it 3 years ago, many people on the local level got interested in the idea. And now there are almost 20 cities who want to do a small-scale experiment with giving people a basic income. So maybe I'm living in this basic income bubble, but I'm a little bit more optimistic. What I see is an idea that's spreading very, very quickly.
To me, I'm also. Don't get me wrong. I'm very optimistic, and I would love this to happen. But to me, is maybe something that you said during your TED talk. It will take time. It will take time for this idea to sit. But I will have. You said that we are trying this. So do we have already some results? That can tell us that this is a good idea, or do we have that?
Yeah, sure. We had, I think the most important experiments were done in Canada and the US in the 70s. So, this seems hard to believe nowadays, but President Nixon was on the verge of implementing a modest basic income at the beginning of the 70s. So it almost happened.
That blew my mind, when you said that, and you show on your TED talk, you show the Nixon picture, and I said, that's not possible. There's no way,
yeah, almost everyone at the end of the 60s expected that some form of basic income would be introduced in just a few years. On the left, on the right, Democrats, Republicans, everyone agreed that this was the way forward. And the Nixon proposal it got through the House twice, but it got stuck in the Senate because Democrats there thought that the basic income proposal wasn't high enough, so they wanted a bigger basic income. Yeah, it's a pretty and this one aspect of that completely bizarre history. But in this time, there were also a few experiments that were conducted. So in the U.S., we had experiments, for example, in Seattle, and the researchers at that moment were especially interested in the question: will people work less? And in the end, I think there were two important results from the U.S. experiment. The first result was that yes, secondary earners do a little less work. So then I'm talking about women and young people who, and they compensated this by doing more unpaid work, volunteers work, and getting more education. So the researchers didn't think this was much of a problem. And the second result that these researchers found was that the divorce rate went up a lot, by about 50% in Seattle. Now, this was, of course, a very explosive finding, especially for many Republicans. This was completely this was a disastrous result. They said, well, the basic income will make women much too independent. This is not what we meant. It was only 10 years later that they found out that a statistical mistake had been made, and in reality, the divorce rate didn't go up at all. So that's what we learned from the American experiment. The experiment in the city of Dauphin. This is even a more fascinating story. What they did, they gave about 1,000 families for 4 years a basic income. They called it the town with no poverty. And there were a lot of researchers, anthropologists and sociologists and economists who went to that small city and started doing research. But after 4 years, there was a new government voted into power in Canada, a conservative government who thought, well, what kind of weird experiment is this? What are we wasting our money on? Let's stop this immediately. And then there wasn't even money to analyze the results. So there were 2,000 boxes full of results, of graphs, of interviews, of numbers, etc. And it was all put in boxes and went to the archive. And it took 25 years for a Canadian professor at Lynn4j to discover and, started researching what actually happened. And what she found out is that the experiment was called Mincome. It was actually a huge success. So again, people didn't work much less. It was only about 3 or 4%. And this was all compensated by more education and more unpaid work. But what she also found that the town got a lot healthier. So hospital admissions, for example, dropped by 8.5%. People did better in school. And so this is actually an even more interesting experiment, I think. And then there are some other experiments around the world with cash transfers, unconditional cash transfers, but this is mostly in poorer countries. So India, there's evidence from sub-Saharan countries. We have programs in Brazil and Mexico. And what we also have, this is also a very interesting natural experiment in the US. And this is in North Carolina. In the 90s, a casino opened there. And all the earnings of the casino went to the eastern band of Cherokee Indians, and they and this amounted to a basic income of about $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000. It varied each year of unconditional money, and the coincidence would have it that at the beginning of the 90s, a professor, Jane Costello, had started doing research there, psychological research into about 1,400 kids. So this was a dream come true for every kind of researcher. There's suddenly this natural experiment happening. And, we get the same results. People do not work less. Health improves dramatically. Kids perform better in school, etc., etc. It's the same result all over again.
To me, when you say, will people stop working, I think, they will quit their crappy job. I think this is one thing that will happen, because as you mentioned in the very beginning, people tend to stay in their shitty jobs sometimes because they don't have a choice. There's their only source of income. And because of that, there's the stress, there's the misery. They are just like they're just unhappy by that, and that causes also, as you mentioned, lots of health issues as well, due to this stress. So to me, it's this idea of freedom. If you don't care now about, okay, I will have a shelter and I will have my food in any case. And if people will have this ability to go for their passion, to go for really what they really, really love to do, imagine the difference of society that we'll have. I think that will be such a progressive idea here. It just, instead of working because you have to just to do what you really love to do. And that's, I would love to experience this time right now. So, but when do you think actually that will happen? Do you have any estimate of a time frame that we can count these ideas? These basic.
Well, I'm an historian, and historians always like to say that trend watchers and futurists, etc., they're all, no one knows what the future holds, and that's really because I think that ideas can make a difference. I'm not a determinist that things, you have to just extrapolate from these trends. If that would be true, then maybe we should be very pessimistic. Then we should think that, inequality will only increase and television will only get worse.
and we will die by climate change as well. So yeah.
Yeah, etc. But I really, really agree with what you just said. There's been this fascinating essay that was written by David Graeber, an American anthropologist. It's called "On the Phenomenon of Bullshit Jobs," and he defines a bullshit jobs by saying that a bullshit job is a job that even the people who have these kind of jobs themselves say.
It's bullshit.
It's and no one really cares if I don't show up at work. My job doesn't add anything of value. It doesn't make the world a better, a prettier, or more interesting place. And last year, the first poll was conducted in the UK, and they asked people, "Do you think that your job has any value?" And 37% of all British people, or people in this poll, said no. Just last month, a similar poll was conducted in Belgium, and it was about 31%. So I think this result is quite consistent, that about a third of all jobs in Western countries are considered bullshit by the people who have these jobs themselves. Now, just think about that for a moment. I mean, this is a huge amount of waste. Yeah. We like to think about government waste or the waste of people who are on welfare or whatever, but this is much, much bigger. This is a third of the workforce, and many of these people are actually earning a lot of money. Many of these people are not working for the government, but in the private sector, and still they're saying something that shouldn't. It's not supposed to happen in capitalism. There should be this kind of invisible hand that gets rid of all bullshit. Well, it's not working. The invisible hand is not doing its job because. Somehow these bullshit jobs are everywhere. Now, I think indeed a basic income is the most efficient, most effective, most direct tool we have to get rid of a lot of bullshit. No. Because people don't like being stuck in these kind of jobs.
And I agree with the bullshit jobs, and I know exactly what you're mentioning. There's lots of this job where you just put data in a spreadsheet and you send it to somebody else, and all these kind of things. But you have also very hard jobs, which are not bullshit jobs, like people who are, taking the trash, and go to the sewer, which to me are difficult. And I guess one of some of the people will say, well, look, these are very, very, very difficult jobs, and people won't do them now. Who will do this job? And I don't believe that. I believe that there's a sense of meaning. Even if in this job you do something for the society. So I believe some people will continue to do this, but at the same time, I'm looking at all the, automation that we're having. That's coming as well. Like you've seen video. I'm sure you have seen this video of Boston Dynamics. Where they're giant robots which look like very scary, which is almost there. So can't we use that? Can't we use like the automation and robots to do also this difficult job for us and make it work for us? What do you think?
Well, I think that's always been the idea of automation. That Thomas Paine said that as well. Each new machine that takes some of the jobs that we do now, it's a blessing for humanity, as long as we let everyone profit from this kind of progress, and not give the profit to just a small class of the people who own the robots. And there's another thing as well. You thought, well, for example, the garbage men, that they will continue doing their jobs if they have a basic income because they find meaning in it. And I think that's quite right. But there's another reason as well. If they would have a basic income, then the garbage men, but also the care workers in our society and the teachers, they will have a lot of more bargaining power, because they can say, I can always fall back on my basic income. So you'll have to give me a higher salary, and then I'll continue doing my job. And I think this is actually a very good thing, that people who have jobs of high societal value would earn much more money, and this wouldn't be the case for many people who work in the financial sector or in the advertising sector or lobbying sector, etc. They wouldn't receive this extra bargaining power, and I think that's actually a good thing.
And I agree with you, but at the same time, I can see this big giant corporation, and these CEOs say, "What the fuck are you talking about? I deserve my big bonuses because of all this and this." And I agree with you. Like it's a shame that nurses and garbage men and people who contribute a lot in the societies don't have. They are not paid enough. Like teachers as well, they are not paid enough.
Yeah. It's really the biggest taboo of our time, that there are so many people who earn such high salaries who have jobs that are in reality actually quite useless. I always like to give the example of strikes. There's a very easy way to find out if your job is useful. Just go on strike and see what happens. Now, if you're a garbage man, that's of course going to be a huge problem. Myself, I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. I think in the long run, if all writers stop writing and all journalists stop writing, that's going to be a problem as well. But what will happen, for example, if all bankers stop banking, if they stop doing their work? Well, I looked at a lot of places in history, and I found only one example in all world history that all bankers went on strike. And this was in Ireland, 1970. The bankers of Ireland thought that their wages were not keeping up with inflation, and they said, we're going to stop. And from one day to the other, about 85% of the money supply was locked behind doors in Ireland, and economists all predicted that this was going to be a huge disaster. That this would be like a heart attack for the Irish economy. But then what happened is, how do I describe this? Well, not much at all. Actually, the strike went on for about 6 months. The Irish economy just kept growing. The Irish developed their own money system. They kept writing checks to each other on toilet paper, for example, or on the back of cigar boxes or whatever. And they kept exchanging stuff, and the role of the bankers was taken by the Irish pubs. Ireland had about 10,000 pubs at that point, and there's actually one historian who says that if you are the owner of a pub, then or if you deal in liquid stuff, then you also know a lot about the liquidity of your clients. And this actually worked. And then after 6 months, the bankers came back and said, "Oh well, we're going to get back to work."
We're just joking. Come on, love us again.
Now, yeah. So what does this example prove? I don't think it says that we don't need a financial sector at all. That's not the point of this story, because the Irish immediately developed their own financial sector and their own system of money supply. But what it does show is that there is a lot of bullshit. A lot of rent seeking, a lot of parasitic business activity that doesn't create any wealth whatsoever. And it's not me saying this. It's also the IMF and the Bank of International Settlements saying this nowadays. That about half or even more of the financial sector in countries like the Netherlands, where I live, or the US, it's just parasitic. It's rent seeking. It's welfare on steroids.
And it makes more sort of think about something, which is, we talk about free money for everyone, and it's a shocking idea. But we have to remember something, in 2008, when we had this big financial crisis, what happened is we had this quantitative easing, which is basically free money for the banking sector, which was injected, and with no, guarantees or nothing. We just say, okay, take this money.
Definitely.
And
that's a very direct way, but there are many other ways in which rich people get free money nowadays. They get this by lobbying the government, by having monopolies. The patents regulations is very important here. This is what economists call rent seeking, and especially in the US nowadays, it's huge. Yeah, the richer you are, the bigger the chances that you didn't really work for for your money.
No, it's true, and it's shocking, and it seems that we have this idea that, it comes from our work, and and that's why I think this basic income, it's still, it's our belief system is kind of fighting a little bit, maybe, but if you see the trends, this, and I will use the 1%. You can see over the years their income going like this, and the median income is kind of flattish. And I remember I've seen this graph in the US, meaning that we are not gaining anything, but at the same time the system seems to profit to these rich people, kind of. So what's happening?
That's also why we really need to rethink what work actually is. We really need to rethink where wealth comes from. So in the GDP, for example, which is the holy grail of our thinking about how society is doing, we don't even count unpaid labor in GDP. But again, let's imagine that we all went on strike and that we won't do any unpaid labor, that we won't do the dishes anymore, that we will not give any education for our kids or whatever, society would crumble instantly. So it's very obvious that this is all real wealth, but we don't even include it in GDP. But we do include a lot of things that are actually harmful.
Actually,
so that's what I mean by we really need to rethink what work actually is. And that's also why I think that basic income is actually a pro-work policy. It will enable people to do less useless work and more useful stuff.
Cool, that's cool. Actually, when you mentioned the GDP things, I believe that they included now the money from the drugs and prostitution money as well, part of the GDP. I believe I've heard about that, and I said, that's fine. Fuck, man. Now, talking about, doesn't matter. It's all about the money. It doesn't matter, what you do, exactly what you described. So maybe GDP is not the right way to measure the health of a country, and there's other indexes I think about happiness and whatever, but I think that's should be more driven not only by money. I would like to come back to something else, because you've written a book which is called Utopia for Realists. I think this is the English version, and I haven't read it, sorry, but I need to order it. But the tagline of this book is the case for universal basic income. This is what we talked about, but also open borders and a 15 hours work week.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man! Do you want to go against Trump now? Trump will shoot you in the head. With these kind of things. Open borders and 15 hours work week.
These are all pretty crazy ideas, right? But I think the 15-hour work week idea is it's not that radical at all. This was actually a prediction from John Maynard Keynes. He said in 1930 that if we would continue trading a little bit of our economic growth into more leisure time, that we would have a work week of about 15 hours in 2030. And up until about 1970 or 1980, this indeed happened. So we were on track to the 15-hour work week. It was only after 1980 that we start buying stuff that we don't need to impress people that we don't like. But you know, I think this is not that crazy idea. Indeed, the open borders idea is much crazier. I must admit that. But I think the purpose of utopian thinking, and that's what my book is all about, is to try and reimagine how society could work. You know, every milestone of civilization that we have now was once considered utopian, crazy. You know, democracy, the end of slavery, the welfare state, all these kinds of things that we have now and take for granted, they were all regarded as completely crazy ones. So if we want to have real progress, then we need to have some kind of vision, something that's regarded as utterly unrealistic and unaffordable and, you know, bizarre, but that may sometime, you know, be regarded as simply civilization. Maybe we'll look back on our system of borders in 300 years' time, the same way we look back now on medieval torture. You know, I'm not saying that it will, but it truly is the biggest injustice of our time, that about 60% of your income depends on the place where you were born. This is the biggest source of discrimination in all world history, and that's what that chapter is about. And the idea of open borders, which is of course a very utopian idea, and I'm not saying we should do that immediately, but the open borders actually have a lot of benefits. There's a lot of economic research that shows that immigration is actually, and you won't read this in the news because news is only about the exceptions. But in general, immigration is good especially for the people who come to richer countries. You know, they'll get huge increases in wages, but it's also beneficial in many cases for the native population. So this is the research that I talk about in that chapter.
Great. But I think this is, you know, what you just said is I think right now we need a vision, or we need a dream, or we need a hope somehow. Because if you look, as you said, around, you know, the news, you look at ISIS, you look at Trump, you look at, you know, UK just left, with the Brexit, they want to leave Europe. You know, it seems like we are, you know, we're not making progress, or we are thinking backward. You know, we just say, I need to protect myself. You know, I'm so fearful of everything now. Everything can happen, and you know, we need, and it seems this idea of progress, of freedom, of working less, of, you know, trying to come with this, you know, human, I don't know, hope or dream. I don't know. This is something which is lost. We don't hear about that, you know.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes a politician comes along and says, you know, we need hope and change, but then there's not really a significant program proposed, or there's not really a utopian dream that's worth thinking about. So yeah, I really agree. The problem with the left and many progressives nowadays is that they only think about what they want to defend, and they're always against something. You know, we're against austerity, we're against the neoliberals, we're against whatever, we're against the war in Iraq, we're against all these kind of things. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be against all these things, but what are you for? You know.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, not only what are you for, what do you want to do next year, but what do you want to do in the next 10 years, or in the next 20 years, in the next 30? Where's your big vision? Exactly. And this is a really big problem with social democracy worldwide. You see this especially in Europe, and this is also the cause of Brexit, is that the Remain campaign, they said, well, let's stay in Europe because the alternative was worse. Well, that's not really a vision, you know.
You cannot sell that.
That's not really a vision. There's almost no one in Europe, and this is also in my country, the Netherlands, who really has the courage to stand up and say, I have a vision of a different kind of Europe that works for everyone. There's a few people, maybe the Greek finance minister, you know him probably, Yanis Varoufakis. You know, he has this movement nowadays for European democracy, etc. And I think that's very interesting what he's doing. But he's lonely, you know.
Man, we need something. You know, how can we help that? You know, what can we do? You know, what is your advice? Actually, you know, you need to run for president somehow. First of all, that's the first thing that you need to do, my friend. But you know, we need that actually. We need hope, I guess. You know.
Yeah. Well, what I think what's really important to remember is that politics is not something that only happens in Washington or in Brussels or in London or all these kind of places where politicians come together and talk to journalists. Politics with a capital P is something that happens on a lot of other places. For example, in conversations like these, and if you have millions of conversations like these, then the country can start changing its mind. You know, I really think that ideas matter, that they can make a difference. Maybe not in the short run, but definitely in the long run. So I think that books matter. I think that YouTube and movies and podcasts and everything, all these kind of things matter, because it's all about changing the minds of people. So real politics doesn't really happen in the places where politicians come along, because they're always defending the status quo. You know, they're always keeping the system as it is. There's one great concept that was developed by a American thinker. He was actually a libertarian. I don't know if you heard of him. He came up with the concept that's called in political science the window of Overton. Overton is the thinker who came up with it. Okay. This is really fascinating. Let me explain it. His idea was that in any society you have all kinds of ideas which are regarded as acceptable or mainstream. These are in the middle. But on the fringes of the debate, you have ideas that are regarded as radical or even unacceptable or bizarre or utopian. And all the acceptable ideas are in the window of Overton. What we need to do if we want to really change the world is not stay in that window and come up with all these proposals. This is where all the journalists are and where all the think tanks are and all the mainstream politicians, etc. But what we need to do and trying to do is move that window. And how do we do that? Well, not by staying in the middle, and then we'll just keep it in place. But if we move to the fringes of it and push in another direction, to the left or to the right or whatever, then you can, in the long run, really change society or even the world. And we've seen this happening at a lot of times in history. And there's the only sad thing is that it was especially the right and the neoliberals who were extremely successful by moving the window of Overton in the past. The left is really, really bad at this, at it nowadays. So I have this love-hate relationship with the economist Milton Friedman. You know, he was absolutely brilliant. He really understood what it is to change the world. He really knew that he shouldn't stay in the middle, but try to push towards the extremes, and it was extremely influential.
Yeah, but he's kind of a ass at the end of the day, no? This Milton Friedman, no?
Yeah, definitely. But I think we can learn from that, because what he had was a utopian vision. I mean, it's not my utopian vision, but he did have a utopian vision of a society in which government would be almost completely abolished and market forces would reign supreme, etc. But that's how it works. You know, you can change the world if you're unrealistic, if people don't like you, if people don't want to talk to you at parties and etc. And that's why many people don't want to change the world, because they want to be liked by everyone.
So are you lonely, actually? That's a good question for you. Are you lonely right now in your thing? And even does it...
really radical because I'm not very lonely.
You should... Everyone should hate you right now, man. You're not trying hard enough now, Well, but that's good. That's good. Oh, the image is just frozen at the moment. So anyway, but we are... Can you hear me still? Rutger? Okay. Are you still here?
Hello.
We're back. Okay,
great.
We're back. The connection I think it's a sign from big corporation from big corporation to say stop it now,
That was probably
Goldman Sachs for sure. Sorry. I think if we can just close the video for a moment just to wrap it up. And okay, we're back. Sorry, technical difficulties. As we said, it's Goldman Sachs' fault for sure. It's a big corporation. God's sake, we hate these guys. No, we love you guys. Give us 2 minutes to conclude. First of all, well, what I was saying is really I love this conversation because I really really believe in these ideas, and this is what we really need at the moment. We need hope. Humanity needs hopes from this very, very strange time that we are living in. We have lots of, as we said, there's wars, there's climate change, there's this financial instabilities, and we don't have this big project. And what you offering here is not a dream. It's something that we can aspire to and being better. How's that for a conclusion, my friend? How do you like it?
Yeah, I think that's a great wrap-up. What we really need is to think in utopian terms, but you also need to have a pragmatic vision of what you can do tomorrow about it. It's not a utopian vision that we go towards in just one single big step. We're not a revolutionary like they were in the 20th century, but we have some endpoint in mind, an abstract revolutionary vision of where we want to go, and I think you can work towards that every day.
So, where can people go to find you, or what? It's the time that you can plug yourself and sell whatever you can sell.
People can just Google me if they can pronounce or remember my name.
I will put the links. We'll put the links on the website.
Yeah.
In any case.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you can just there's a website for my book, and you can maybe watch my TED Talk. Yeah. I think that's a good introduction.
Very good. Excellent, my friend. Please continue. And I would like to have another podcast with you in a year's time, so 2 years' time, and see where we are after.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.